Hey guys, I'm back for chapter 15 of The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. I just wanted to kind of remind everyone where we were when we left off last. Um, Edward, or Malone, had just been kicked off the train and had flown into the air and landed on the ground and is once again all alone. And he was really, really missing Lucy and Bull. So that's where we left Edward, was laying on the ground when he had been kicked off the train. So we're going to jump into chapter 15 and see what happens next. Wonder what this bird has to do with things. In the morning, the sun rose and the cricket song gave way to bird song, and an old woman came walking down the dirt road and tripped right over Edward. She said. She pushed at Edward with her fishing pole. Looks like a rabbit, she said. She put down her basket and bent and stared at Edward. Oh, he ain't real. She stood back up. She said again. She rubbed her back. What I say is, there's a use for everything, and everything has its use. That's what I say. Edward didn't care what she said. The terrible ache he had felt the night before had gone away and had been replaced with a different feeling, one of hollowness and despair. Pick me up or don't pick me up, the rabbit thought. It makes no difference to me. The old lady picked him up. She bent him double and put him in her basket, which smelled of weeds and fish, and then she kept walking, swinging the basket and singing. Nobody knows the troubles I've seen. Edward, in spite of himself, listened. I've seen troubles. Oops, I'm sorry, this is Edward. I've seen troubles too, he thought. You bet I have, and apparently they aren't over. Edward was right. His troubles were not over. The old woman found a use for him. She hung him from a pole in her vegetable garden. She nailed his ears to the wooden pole and spread his arms out as if he were flying, and attached his paws to the pole by wrapping pieces of wire around them. In addition to Edward, pie tins hung from the pole. They clinked and clanked and shone in the morning sun. Ain't a doubt in my mind that you can scare them off, the old lady said. Scare who off? Edward wondered. Birds, he soon discovered. Crows. They came flying at him, cawing and screeching, wheeling over his head, diving at his ears. Go on, Clyde, said the woman. She clapped her hands. You gotta act ferocious. Clyde? Edward felt a wariness so intense wash over him that he thought he might actually be able to sigh aloud. Would the world never tire of calling him by the wrong name? The old woman clapped her hands again. Get to work! Clyde, scare them birds off. And then she walked away from him, out of the garden, toward her small house. The birds were insistent. They flew around his head. They tugged at the loose threads in his sweater. One large crow in particular would not leave the rabbit alone. He perched on the pole and screamed a dark message in Edward's left ear. Caw, 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 without ceasing. As the sun rose higher and shone meaner and brighter, Edward became somewhat dazed. He mistook the large crow for Pellegrina. Go ahead, he thought. Turn me into a warthog if you want. I don't care. I'm done with caring. Caw, caw, said the Pellegrina crow. Finally, the sun set and the birds flew away. Edward hung by his ears and looked up at the night sky. He saw the stars, but for the first time in his life, he looked at them and felt no comfort. Instead, he felt mocked. I have been loved, Edward told the stars. So this is what the lady had done to Edward. She put him in her garden to try to scare away the crows. So do you guys remember when I showed you at the beginning of this chapter the crow, that bird on this little picture here? Sometimes authors like to do stuff like this. They'll give you little hints of what's to come, and that's called foreshadowing. So here they've put Kate DiCamillo drew this little bird here, put this little bird here. So it would kind of give you a clue of what was coming, because Edward, now being called Clyde, is supposed to be scaring away the crows in this woman's garden. And I think, I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty sure he's feeling pretty miserable, and he's not joyful. He's full of despair and sadness. You are down there alone, the stars seem to say to him, and we are up here, in our constellations together. I have been loved, Edward told the stars. So, said the stars, what difference does that make when you are all alone now? Edward could think of no answer to that question. Eventually, the sky lightened and the stars disappeared one by one. The birds returned, and the old woman came back to the garden. She brought a boy with her. And that is the end of that chapter. I wanted to show you this one more time. So this is where Edward is at the end of this chapter. He's in the garden, and he's supposed to be a scarecrow to scare away the crows. And now this old woman has come back to the garden, and she has brought a boy with her. So think about what might happen next. What do you think might happen to Clyde or Edward? Okay, and I will read chapter 16 to you tomorrow. All right, have a good one.